Okay, this is Warelock. Basically, what we're going to be going over is so we've got AWS here. This is the AWS console, and the idea is you can see all the different things that AWS can. Oh, and you said it was like 45 minutes. Okay. So this is the AWS console, and so there's AWS Amazon as a company presents all these different services that you basically outsource to them, right? So the goal here is to control this, which you could do with let's say for example, you could if you were going to use what is it? Where's CloudFormation, right? So you can basically control the creation of any of this stuff with this tool called CloudFormation, right? But that requires these things called templates, and that's text, and that text needs to live somewhere in some kind of source control. If you used AWS, you could, for example, use some of these developer tools. I believe Code Commit is the closest thing right here to that's basically like Amazon Git, right? So instead of using github.com, you could use Code Commit. So if you don't want to use Code Commit, the idea here is that you're going to be using CloudFormation to kind of create all of your resources or EC2 instances, or here's your EC2 right here. You would then have your template file not live within AWS, but outside in GitHub. So you want to control all of this with this, and this is github.com. And so here's an example repo that I created, and we'll go into that. So that's basically what we're going to be trying to do, which is basically kind of orchestration of resources within Amazon AWS services, but not fully contained within AWS. But we're going to be, and since you're going to be, you've got what is it, AWS on Amazon, you've got Amazon.com, you've got GitHub.com. Those are two completely separate organizations. So there's issues of trust, there's issues of interface. You have to have some way to make these two players play nicely together. And so that's what we're going to be going over. Any questions?
No, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. All right. So what did I start off with? Being lazy, I searched around and I found this lovely page, which I will then post into the meetup text, so you can follow along with that. Nice little blog post, and so it pretty much gives you an overall, breaks down all the steps, and there's going to be some YAML involved, a couple different YAML files, some AWS key secret information, and there's going to be some actual YAML code right here, and this is what makes the whole thing work. Pretty much. I had to make some minor changes. But so this is a really good web page, and I did put it in the chat, so you might want to click on that and follow along. All right, so let's see. So in order to make this work, I need to, and the goal here is that you can go into Amazon, right? You could go into, for example, EC2, which is the thing for virtual machines, and they call them instances. And so if you wanted to create CloudFormation code off of this, you would either have to read a whole bunch of documentation, try to write some code, try it out, realize you didn't understand it at all, go read a boatload more code, or documentation, and try and fail, right? Or you simply go into EC2, you go to instances, and you launch instances. You can create, like if nothing was here and I created a test one, right? It's literally creating me a virtual machine. And so you created it by hand. You had to go through a wizard. We've seen that before in previous talks, where you answer a few questions. It actually spins you up a virtual machine, and instead of saying stopped, it says running. Okay. Now that it's actually in there, you can use another tool, and that's what this here is called Former2. And Former2, there's actually Former2, let's see if I put that link here. I believe former2.com. Yeah. So this code has been deployed at former2.com. And so as you can see here, I'm just really referencing this as a file, this index.html, which is this web page here, because all I did was I went to the Former2 GitHub repo, and I just did a git clone. I don't have the link here, but I'm sure it's pretty easy to find. So that's the way they built it. So that way, basically, you just do a git clone of that to some subdirectory, and then do, in your browser, file open, find the index.html, and literally it just comes up here and it runs locally in your web browser exactly like it would on former2.com. And as long as the code within former2 doesn't rat out any secrets that it obviously needs to operate, because it's gonna authenticate as a client to AWS. Um, you have to let it in to AWS so that it can do, read-only scan of all your stuff. So that's basically what Former2 does. And so let's see here's an example of some, let's see, outputs, CloudFormation. Let me just clear all this. So the idea here is that in order to use this tool, let me see if I can just show you. It brings you to this, as soon as you open it up, it brings you to the setup page. This very first thing you got to do is you have to load up some extension to your whatever web browser you're using. The next page of this wizard is down here at the bottom, and it's literally just taking you through these 4 steps. So the next piece here is credentials. I've already put in my credentials. Once you paste in these credentials, I'll show you how to create those. Basically, the proof that this code is actually reached out successfully and authenticated successfully shows up right here. Normally this is blank as soon as you paste this stuff here. So you could continue to the next page of the wizard and go back. And then as long as you see logged in as, that's your proof that Former2 has authenticated properly. So just so you know. And somebody just posted a link to the Former2, I believe. Yeah, that's the guy. That guy's brilliant. He's created so many tools. Anyway, so once you actually have this in here, you can now, okay, so let's talk about like what's required. Like you're going to have this sort of API token or access key or whatever, an AIM key pair. Okay, so let's take a look at how you would create that. So that's connected with a user, an AWS user. So you have to go into your AWS console. All the user access stuff is under an area called IAM. You can search for that, hit enter. And right here under users, I created a Former2 user. And in order to do a scan of all your stuff, you're going to have to do add permissions. And there's a thing called read-only access. And that's like 99% of the access that this guy needs. Okay. Which I believe this web page, well, actually, I'm not sure. It's not this web page. That's not the Former2 web page I was using. But there is I'll have to see if I can find a web page for Former2, but there was one that I was using that tells you kind of like what you need. But anyway, so as long as you create a user like Former2, and you then you have to add read-only access. When you do that, okay, to actually kick off the functionality of now that you actually have keys that live within, or well, actually this is the permissions, right? Once this user is able to get in. So then what you need in addition to this, okay, are, let's see, security credentials. So it's per user, right? So for this Former2 user, you have to create security credentials, and it basically creates 2 pieces of information. One is called the access key ID, and then there's a secret or a password essentially that goes with that. So it's basically 2 strings. This is one, and then the secret key is the other one. So that lives within AWS, and so you need to feed that to Former2, okay, in order for it to do its job. And you feed that right here. So you can copy and paste that from that setup page or whatever, that little wizard, to create that access key, which is attached to that Former2 user. And as you can see, it worked. And so once we have that in, to actually get this to do anything useful, you have to hit the scan button. And as you can see, it's read-only access is working. The first time I kicked this off, though, I did get some errors because there were some missing permissions that you need in addition to the read-only access stuff. And let's just let that finish. Here it gives you the status. There, it's done. So what I will say is this: if you go back to permissions under this Former2 user, I created a policy under policies and I attached it to this user, which we can simply click that to go into. And I'll show you what was missing. So that's essentially, and so this is the visual editor that you've sort of seen before, but whatever you define here, you can literally look at as JSON. And so these 3 bits of information tells you the service and the type of permission that is service specific, right? I have no idea what profile and wisdom is, whatever. But literally, when you did the former 2 scan here, you'd get errors that would pop up here, and then it's in the error message, it told you the exact thing that you needed, right? So you literally could, it says, hey, I need wisdom list domains. It literally lists it in the error is this. So if you create a profile and you add that additional permissions, literally you get no errors when you click on the scan button. Okay, which is what we just saw. So once you have the credentials in here, you hit the scan button. It's actually populated these categories here with whatever it found. Now, it's not obvious. You kind of have to hunt and peck. But I know, for example, if we go to EC2 in AWS console, and when you hit the former 2 scan button, it's literally looking at what you have right now. So if I went to instances, here I see 2 instances, test 1, test 2, right? So if I go to former 2, I can go to compute EC2, and lo and behold, there's my 2 instances, which I can then say, okay, I want to take a look at these 2 instances. You check them off. Let's just do 1, actually. Well, let's do 2. So you select the resources under whatever it's detected here, which it shows you. And then you say add selected. It adds it to generate here, as you can see, the total number. You click generate, and what it does is it will actually create you a CloudFormation template based on that, which you literally can copy and paste and stick it right into CloudFormation if you wanted to, or save it to a file, and then you can upload it as a file, which is the most common way to do it. So this, what we're looking at here, this is a CloudFormation template, but this literally is the current state of this particular, let's say here we're looking at EC2 instance, right? And how it differentiates is the tag here, and the tag here is test2. So this is basically the CloudFormation template code for the test2 instance that currently exists in AWS. If we scroll down here, we have another block which is almost identical, but it says test1. So if you copied and pasted this into CloudFormation, it would literally create you these 2 instances with all of this information. But that's not the minimal set of information that's required to create an EC2 instance, as evidenced by when you do the actual EC2 instance creation here called launch instances. The wizard only asks you real basic information about, you're going to have to log into the machine. It needs a key pair. So you're going to have to tell it a key pair instance that you create, which you can actually reuse across all of your EC2 instances. So what I did was I whittled all that stuff down, which I'll show you in a little bit. So anyway, so you've got your former 2, you've got your CloudFormation code. And I'll just tell you this right now, if, for example, you wanted to literally see everything, because when you do the scan thing, it peppered all the stuff that you have throughout all the categories, but you don't know overall what you have. Okay, so what you can do is you go to setup here, category. These are the 4 pages of the wizard, the introduction. Remember, that was the one that gave you these little extension links. If you go to the last page, there's an add all resources button. And so if you go back up here, if you want to clear this out, you click on generate and you say clear all. That resets that little counter. And then you go back to setup and you go to settings. And then you go to add all resources, which is basically the same thing as scan again. But what it does is it will literally add every single thing that it finds possible. It's almost like a text-based backup of your account. So let's try that. And you can see that it found 26 items. Now, if I generate that, okay, I didn't pick like EC2 instance, test 1 and test 2, and that's all I had to look at. This is literally everything you've got. So this is your, a definition for an IAM user. The username here is Github Actions. Here's Warelock. Here's former 2. It literally tells you every single thing in your account, right? So that way, if you just go, well, what the hell do I have in EC2 or in Amazon? This is one way to easily find out. It's like a complete scan. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah,
But that's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing.
quick question too, if you
Yeah.
don't mind.
Sure.
So essentially, this is scanning just everything that's currently in place, whether it's secure or not. Because I did see one of the EC2s that, like, for example, one of the EBS volumes like wasn't encrypted. So essentially, you could leverage this to quickly build like a CloudFormation template, walk through like the EC2 instance, and like, oh, hey, you know what? This isn't encrypted. We should encrypt this volume on this to make it so it has like encrypted storage, and then essentially secure it and apply that CloudFormation template. Is that like a
Yeah,
good use case
I
for it?
mean, it'll create what you tell it, right? So if you
Yeah, yeah,
if it, when I created the EC2 instance, um, that I started this whole thing, or that okay. So these particular two EC2 instances were created by a template. I'll show you the template, right? Which is a subset of this information you're seeing right here on your screen, right?
mhm,
Because I whittled it down to like the basics of what you would need, and so I think the default is that it is not encrypted, which is
yeah,
why
yeah.
you're seeing that. So I'll show you the code that CloudFormation used to create this instance that you're looking at the current state description of.
Okay, but
So,
my my question and point is more, if let's say you already have like a EC2 instances created already, and you don't have, and it was more done manually through the console, and you don't have those CloudFormation templates, you could leverage Former 2 to create the CloudFormation templates and then adjust the settings to secure it as possible.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course you
Yeah.
can.
Okay.
So I can take this code here, I can dump that into CloudFormation, or I can modify it. I can put it in a text file. I can change false to true, and then I can paste it into CloudFormation and say build me something, and it'll build me something that's encrypted,
Cool.
right? Or if there's an existing one that matches this, well, I'm not really sure how that would work, but basically the idea is that this is declarative so that you basically tell it what state you want it to be in, just like Ansible. So if it wasn't encrypted, like if the current state was not encrypted, but you then edit the template within CloudFormation and you say encrypted false to encrypted true, and then you say update my stack, it will simply go and change your existing machine to match that state. So if it's encrypted equals false, but you just set it to encrypted equals true, CloudFormation will basically fix it and encrypt it.
Hey, Warelock.
Yeah.
Um, can you what's going on with the user data? Can you explain
I'll
what's
ex- yeah, yeah. So basically, well, user data is a feature of um, it's a feature of EC2, and what it is that if, for example, let's say when you start up a machine, you wanted it to patch itself on first boot. There's a feature when you do a launch instance under advanced that you can say, um, here are some commands that I want you to run upon boot. Like I want you to patch yourself. You would say, let's say it's a CentOS instance. You could say yum -y update, right? And you give it the commands that it would need to that like as if you're running it upon first boot. So that way, basically, if you create an instance, every time you create it, when EC2 creates that, it does a launch instance for you, it builds the whole thing, and as a final step, it runs those commands, and it would basically do as if you immediately logged into it and patched it right away. So user data is a feature of EC2, and it's for commands that need to be run on the machine. So its normal use is to run it first only on first boot, first time, or first like just after you provisioned it. But I also figured out how to always have a command run on every single boot, and I'll show you exactly how I did that. Now you're seeing a
Warelock?
bunch of hex data. Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, you're about to get into that.
yeah. So you're seeing a bunch of this is actually base64 encoded, so you can copy and paste this, and it shows you a specially formatted blurb according to the way that the user data field has to be structured. That has MIME encoded information to basically it's a trick to basically trick the user data feature to always run this code on every boot. And it'll become clear once I show you. Okay.
What's that? What's
So
that encoding that it's in? It looks very
base64.
strange. Oh, okay, okay. Thank you.
If you copy and paste this and if you said echo this pipe base64-D, you'll see the text that I copied and pasted, the clear text I pasted into the user data field when I did the launch instance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it just looks a little different, like from the configuration file that I provided with CloudFormation at the top of it, and I just put it into the meetup text. It has an FN : base64 : whatever sub blah blah blah. I think then you can see regular text, like you're like, oh, I'm trying to install this or I'm trying to do that, but doing the FN base64 at the top, kind of base64 is all that
Yeah, that's probably a better way to.
readable.
Yeah, there's probably a better way to do it. There's all these functions and features within CloudFormation, like whatever, right? But this is how Former 2 sees it, and literally, if you have user data like this living in your CloudFormation template, it will work. But the way you have it posted right there in the meetup text is better.
Cool.
Okay. So anyway, so you've got your stuff. You got your stuff defined here. You created something by hand. You're like, I don't have the code to do the infrastructure as code. Former 2 scans your stuff, gives you the infrastructure, or gives you the code which generates the infrastructure. But it's got to live somewhere, because the feature that we mentioned earlier of CloudFormation, right, which does all this heavy lifting, like these 2 instances were created by that. If we take a look at CloudFormation, this, whatever lives here is current, like this represents a YAML file that when CloudFormation reads it, it does the thing, like it builds the EC2 instances. So there's a stack of technology living within AWS that corresponds to this template, this CloudFormation template. Like this is literally live. Okay. So when I get rid of it, like how it got here was maybe like a text file. And I said, upload to CloudFormation. And then if it lives here, that means it's live. There's literally a stack of resources that match it. If I delete this, CloudFormation's like brainless. It doesn't know anything about it. So there has to be a separate authoritative source of where that source code lives, the YAML text file, which if I click on this, I can just show you. Here's the template, right? So like literally this, you could copy and paste that Former 2 output, this stuff, into a text file, upload it where there's no stacks, and take a look at it here. Click on the stack, go to template, and then literally this should match this because you uploaded it. The only difference here is that this is like a container description or template or whatever it's called, like in Docker, and this is an actual instance that you spawned off. Okay. So yes, so that's the reason why you have. Yeah.
Sorry. Does it matter if we use this can we use JSON for this as well too, or is it got to be YAML?
I think it's got to be YAML. Yeah. Did I say JSON?
No, I was just curious.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure it's got to be YAML. So, yeah. So, all right. So now you're like, okay, so I created something by hand. I didn't have the code. This guy made me the code. I saved it as a file. I uploaded it into CloudFormation. Oh, look, it works, right? Like it went ahead and did the thing. And so what we have here is EC2 instance, and then we have EC2 instance, right? And then we go to EC2, we were over there, and you can see that there's a matching test 1 and test 2. So we can tell that it worked because I had no EC2 instances before that. So now what's that?
Sorry, just real quick. Could you click on events real quick? Because this is something that actually like a lot of there we go. So this is actually an area that like a lot of vendors that I've seen and just clients in general where they're just like, oh, how do we know if the stack completed? Well, the events. It's funny
Oh,
because
yeah,
they don't click
yeah.
on that and they don't know, and so it's like because you'll see like, hey, update in progress, and sometimes you get stuck on update in progress. Like, so if the CloudFormation stack is actually being applied, like this one was really quick, so you can already see that the update was complete. But sometimes, like if you don't hit refresh, it'll stay as like, hey, update in progress, update in progress, update in progress, and the client, like I've had clients that'll be like, well, why isn't this applying? Why isn't this CloudFormation stack applying? And so then until you hit refresh, then it'll show update as complete. So that's sometimes
there's
an
a lot.
area that I've seen people get stuck on.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can interfere with this whole process. Like you could have a stack and you could say, I would like to make a change. Encrypted equals false. Change it to encrypted equals true. And that's a stack update. And so if the thing that's trying to do the stack update, which in this case externally would be GitHub, doesn't have the permissions as the user is trying to authenticate as, that will make a bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
there's
even
many things.
the other point is that even if it's completed, so if you apply a stack and you're watching this event as it goes, and you don't hit that little refresh button, it could stay on update in progress because I
Oh
don't.
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's
This is
auto-
manual. Yes, you do.
Yeah, so you have to
do
keep,
have to click
so
it.
essentially the user just has to keep clicking it until you
Yes,
see update
yes,
complete.
yes,
Sometimes
yes.
like people will be like, "This isn't working. Why isn't it working?" It's like, "Did you hit refresh?"
Yeah,
And so,
there's a
yeah,
refresh here that shows you a
yeah,
refresh of this. If you change, I don't know, like it's per tab. Then there's a refresh here. Then if you went to CloudFormation stacks, there's a refresh here, right?
yeah,
Because you could just be on this page, and this gives you an overall up, like did the thing work, not
yeah.
down in the weeds, right? So, if it's done, whether it's a creation from scratch or it's a stack update, when it's done and it worked, it'll literally look like this.
Yeah,
Where-
that's
Just
just
you have to
something
keep.
that
Yep.
I've
Yeah.
had clients run into, so figured I'd call it out.
What happens if we accidentally like submit a bad template? Do we have any chances of like breaking our infrastructure?
Well, from what in general, I don't know if that's been a problem for some people, but I know for myself when I did this, like because I had problems with the template, because there could be problems in the code in the template, it could be problems with the permission, it could be any number of different problems, right? That could interfere with its ability to do the thing. What happened is I was doing stack updates and it had a problem with the change I was trying to make, and so what it did was it backed out of it and it left, like if this was the state that it's in where it says update complete and I want to make a change, which is a stack update, and the update fails, it'll roll back to this state and you'll see it go back to this. So that's I'm not sure how I can simulate that for you, but that's literally the behavior. So it has a current state, and then if you want to change that state, if there's a problem changing that state, it'll roll back to its last known good, which is this, for example. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. These are all important things to keep in mind. But what's great about this is because you have the actual template code living somewhere in source control, that is your authoritative source. So if we delete this, and you say replay this back out there, you should literally get it all back. So that's part of the power of having infrastructure as code, and it has to live somewhere. So if you didn't use something external like GitHub.com, you would use like code commit, which is purely within AWS. But so let's take a look at that. So here we have our stack, and so we're like, yeah, we created it. Here's this stuff. Where does this all live now? We're not using code commit, right? But we want to use, let's say, Git. Okay, so that's literally what this is here. I created a repo. I called it AWS Test One Stack. This was all blank. But there's a feature called Actions within GitHub, and so the idea is Actions is a sort of it's a feature that GitHub makes available for CI/CD builds, like a pipeline. So any code you stick in here, as long as you tell it what type of code it is, like a CMake project or whatever, that has like a million different types of profiles to match the code that you stick into source control here. As long as you tell it what it is and what to do with it and how to build it, if your repo is free, then GitHub Actions is provided to you by the GitHub, by Microsoft or whatever who owns GitHub. They give it to you for free if it's a public repo. This is a public repo, therefore I can do it for free. So there's really three components here in GitHub. You have, this is the template, which this is literally what I pulled out of Former 2 and obviously reduced. As you can see, this is a lot shorter for the EC2 instance, and all it specifies is the AMI image, which is the golden image from Amazon, which is basically I think it's an Ubuntu machine. The hardware type, you have to tell it that. You have to give it a key name pair, which is your ability to access your machine remotely with SSH. So when you created the key pair, upon launching the instance, if you didn't have one, it creates you a public-private SSH key pair, and it gives you the private key file as a .pem or .pem file that matches. This is the name that it matches. This is not necessarily the user or whatever. Let's see, and then also you have to tell it where to go. So this I literally stole or everything but the A part. I literally stole it. Or actually, did I steal the A part out of? Oh, like right here. So as you can see, this is a little CloudFormation macro. This represents your current region or your default region, and this is they've got like A, B, C. You know, so like this one, this EC2 instance is in, I guess, availability zone B within this region, and this one is in availability zone A. Okay. And so as we can see here, I actually specified A here and B here. Okay. So you have to tell. So what's the software, what's the hardware, how do I get into it, where does it go exactly, any kind of special stuff you want to do, and what do I call it?
Warelock. Sorry for interrupting. What's the what do those curly brackets do?
Oh, this is so typically that's for variable substitution, but this is there's a way to access sort of information that's relevant to your account. So like I think this here represents the region of, like, if I go here, every time you create some resources, let's see if I go to all services, view all. Anytime you create any kind of services within AWS, there's a region that you have to specify, right? So I believe that when I run this, it will reference whatever I have set as my default one. Okay, so and since I'm in this North Virginia US East one, I can actually go look at CloudFormation and I can see that's literally where it stuck my stack. So this actually is output from that whole thing. So I know that it put it in the right place. So there's documentation of CloudFormation where like, for example, in that code that Jesse posted into the meetup text, there's an FN, I don't know, there's like a sub, it's exclamation sub. If you take a look at that real quick, is a little macro. There's a bunch of different little CloudFormation macros. I'm not super familiar with them all, but in my code, I'm using sub right here, and so it's a substitution. So basically, it's saying, this is a way of saying, AWS region. I think this is like ARN notation. I'm not sure. I don't know, but if you look up the CloudFormation documentation and you, for example, looked up, I think it's availability zone, they've got code examples in there, and I think they even give you a substitution example. But that's very common in the documentation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So anyway, so now we got our code, right? This is a YAML file, and we stuck it in this repo. So here it is, and all I'm really telling it is I want to have 2 EC2 machines, and one is test 1, one's test 2, right? And as you can see, all the details. That's the first component. Second component is basically has to do with this CI/CD pipeline feature called Actions. Now, if you create a new repo, this is all blank, so you have to create a new workflow, and there's a bunch of different templates where you have to tell it like what it is. This is for Terraform, or you tell it's Python, or you tell, I don't know, whatever. Like you tell it CMake. You literally have to tell it how to build it, or build projects with make, right? That's a pretty common thing. Anytime you've ever downloaded source code and did a make, what is it? /configure make install. That's what this will do for you. And it's spawning off all these containers, and it will actually creates you these temporary virtual machines that will basically build the code. It steals the binary out of that, and then it deploys it to a place where everybody can get to it. So if you can find one that matches it, that's great. In our case, we've got an AWS action. This was created by AWS. Called AWS CloudFormation GitHub deploy. And so if we go back to this original page, I believe they tell you about that. Let's see. That's essentially what this is. Okay. So if, for example, we wanted to let me go back to actions. So I have an action right now. It's called a workflow, and it's called deploy to AWS CloudFormation. That matches this, deploy to AWS CloudFormation. I literally stole this, okay? And the only thing you have to change is the fact that it says master here. GitHub actually has changed their terminology to say main instead, and you have to tell it the name of the YAML file. That's literally like all I changed. And so I stole this and I stuck it into here. If I go into the actions and I go to, here's the deploy.yml, and I pretty much, as you can see, it looks almost identical. I copied and pasted it, and I updated this, I updated that, and I changed master to main, because that's literally the main branch or master branch in my repo. And so all of this is boilerplate. Okay. In fact, this up here is also boilerplate all the way down to these last like 2 lines right here. So this here has to match the file that's in your the template file that you stored in GitHub. So once you have that, then and the significance of this up here is that once you actually have this in place, if you, for example, make a change to the template and you push it to the main branch, that's the event that kicks off the build, and it will literally take that YAML file and push it to AWS. So that's what that is. And here I will give you a link to this repo. Sorry that I haven't done that. I don't think I've done that so far, so you can follow along. So to create that, you go to actions. If this was from scratch, you'd have to say new workflow. There is no template that matches it, so you would say set up a workflow yourself. And then you could do a search here for CloudFormation. And this is the actual thing that we used. This is AWS CloudFormation by AWS Actions. This was actually developed by Amazon. And so they give you this stuff here that you could probably try to use, but I just stole this from this guy, this blog post I gave you. And there's also documentation that you can read through. It tells you about the triggers for it and all that kind of good stuff. So what I did was I took this over here, I copied this, and I pasted it into here, okay, and then modified it, and that created this file called, under .github workflows. I think I called it deploy.workflow, and so you can actually find that here. There's 2 ways to get to it. If you know the path, you can go here, and this is the actual thing that makes the GitHub Actions code do its thing. And it's important that it's going to need a couple of bits of information. Like there has to be credentials to get in, which you have to create. Something called access key and access key secret. Okay. This text here is boilerplate. You don't change it, but you have to make sure that the keys that you create are those 2 bits of information are literally have to be called that in AWS. And the place that you do that is you have to create a user called GitHub. I call it GitHub Actions, and I'll show you that right now. So to find that, you go under IAM. I created a user called GitHub Actions. Under users, here's GitHub Actions. And for each user, you can create a security credential. And also in the documentation, it does tell you need to have permissions associated with this. So I'll take a look at that real quick. I had to create a policy under policies and attach it. And as you can see here, let me see if I actually have, this right here, which I'll give you, is the sort of blog post of the AWS Actions people of like, hey, we created this GitHub AWS Action, that makes GitHub Actions compatible with AWS, right? So this is what you're going to need. And so they tell you, go into AWS, create a policy. These are literally the permissions that you need. And you can see this is the name of the service. There's a colon, and then there's a specific permission attached to it. You can literally steal this, copy and paste it, or you could go through the little visual wizard. So that's what it looks like over here. As you can see, because I did EC2 stuff, because my template code was telling it to do EC2 stuff, and it was failing, I had to add this, which is like all permissions in EC2. That's probably a bad idea, but I did it and it worked. And then you can also use this wizard here to add these things one by one if you wanted to. So once you've added that, you've created that policy, you've attached it to that user, then you, let's go back into the user. And as we remember here, we had these specific names. We have to create stuff that matches that. Okay, let's just go. We have to actually create a key and a secret. So we go here. It's user specific, GitHub Actions. then you have to go security credentials. And this is a per user feature. So any user that you create can have a key, like it's like an API token basically. So you do create access key and it gives you this string, which is the ID, which is public, I guess, whatever. And then there's the secret key portion of it. It's just 2 strings of data. And GitHub needs it. So you either stick it hard coded like into your template, which is a bad idea, or you can use a key management feature within secrets management feature within GitHub. So that lives here. If you go to your repo, you go to settings, and then you have to go to secret and variables and actions. And as you can see, there's the key secret. These are just placeholders to hold the data that you generated here. So the wizard that you kick off to create this literally gives you 2 strings to copy and paste. So you would want to copy and paste them directly into, like you just create this, copy and paste the key value in here, and then secret value goes inside of this.
Warelock.
And because this name, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, because and the key thing here is that you have to make sure that when you do create a new repository secret, just copy and paste the name straight out of that code so that it matches. What's your question?
Oh, should we commit these Oh, never mind. Sorry, I read the wrong thing. No, keep on going.
Okay. Yeah, so let me kind of plow through this. Okay, so once you have the secrets in place, GitHub has the secrets that it needs, but it's not explicitly stated in the template code as we saw here, right? It's literally just telling it, go look this up in GitHub. Once it actually has that, it just does it has the API key or secret, that AWS requires. So this is a client can go in and do the magic. Okay. So that's all that has to be in place. Once it's actually there, literally you can make changes to your template. Here's a second way to get to it. If you go to actions, and this is the actual action that got created, or the workflow that got created, here's a link to that deploy.yml file. So that's a second way to get to that same code file that we were looking at before, the access key and access secret key. So that's a second way to get there. Okay, so let's actually see it in action. I've already deployed this. So that would be under CloudFormation. And the reason why this is not blank, but you see something here, is because I did the actual deploy from GitHub. And that's why this is here. And then once this actually completed the update complete, that's what created those 2 EC2 instances that you see. So I'm going to delete this, and I have it set up. So I think the default setup is that any resources that get created, like EC2 instances or something that are attached to this template, if you delete this template, it deletes those resources. It doesn't have to be set up that way, but I think it's set up that way by default or whatever. So I'm going to delete this. So you select this and say delete.
And just a heads up, I think we have about 5 minutes.
Okay, let me see if I can wrap this up real quick. So I just wanted to show you the final demo. Delete in progress, and it didn't show me that until I clicked this refresh. And we can actually click on this and see more event. Delete in progress, delete in progress. You can click on refresh here. Since it's going to be deleted, this is going to be invalid anyway, so I'm just going to back out of this and get my status from here. And now you can see that it's gone. Now we know that 2 certain things were associated with that, which we're going to go take a look at that. They should be gone as well if I go to instances. And they're not gone, but they're in a terminated state. And all this is just a placeholder, an audit log sort of placeholder to show you that it was deleted. You can literally never boot these up again. They're just gone. And these entries will time out. So let's go back to CloudFormation. You can see that it's blank because this is not the authoritative source of this. This is over here. That's the authoritative source. So I'm just going to go to the actions here. Since I have a workflow that's defined, I believe I can just click on it and say run workflow. You say run in branch main, run workflow. And I believe, yeah, so here we have it updating. We can click on this to get live status. And there's further information hidden within there. And these are the actual steps that are being done live. And the thing that's these check marks are done. This is this is what's happening live right now. And therefore, I should be able to go to CloudFormation and hit refresh. And lo and behold, create in progress. Go to events. And it's safe to stay in here because we're not deleting it. And we just hit refresh. And since we know it's doing EC2, we can go to EC2. Take a look at this real quick. Instances. And we see 2 brand new instances running. It's not available to log into until this says I think it's like says checks 2 of 2 passed. It'll go from initializing to steps check 1 of 2 passed to check 2 of 2 passed. Once it reaches that check 2 of 2 passed, probably about a minute later, you should be able to SSH in the machine with the key pair that you told it. So you can sit here and watch it. You can watch the grass grow here real quick. Well, it won't take long at all. And there's no conflict between test 1 and test 2 because this is terminated and that's running. So there can be 3 states, either terminated, either running, stopped, or terminated. Stopped is simply you shut the machine down, but you can boot it up again. Fully booted is running, and deleted is terminated, and it's just a placeholder to show you. So we can simply take a look at this.
While you're waiting, so I totally forked that GitHub repo. I can't wait to put some of my CloudFormation templates in there and use that Git action, man.
And here's one thing I'll show you. Since it's creating it, I'll click on this and I'll show you. Let's see. Oh, you can to pull up logs. You know, if you ever just wanted to know this, you go Actions. I think it's Monitor and Get System Log. But this will not populate until that thing is passed this checks 2 of 2. There's also a command line way to get this, but this is an easy way to do this, which you can refresh, right? And what's important is that if you don't set up that user data thing to actually force upon every single system boot to dump the SSH server key fingerprints to the system log, the only time you're ever going to see it is upon like first boot of your EC2 instance. So let's go take a look at what I created here, and I'll show you where does that live. I don't remember. Let me see if I can figure out where it is. Here, edit user data. So it's under Actions, Instance Settings, Edit User Data. So literally, this is the code here, which I will expand. So you can see what I'm asking it to do. And all this extra junk here is MIME encoding crap is literally a trick to make sure that it won't just simply run the command once upon initial provisioning and never do it again. This forces us to do it every single time. This is a root level action. So all this is boilerplate all the way down to here, basically. And this is just 2 lines of script code. This gets run as root. And literally all you're doing is ls-l on all of your SSH server keys. And you're saying loop through this and do SSH keygen-l f, which just gives you the fingerprints. But it does it on every single boot. I highly recommend every system that you set up, shove this in there. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to paste it into the chat. Whoops. Okay, so that thing I just shoved into chat, I highly recommend you put that in there. Otherwise, if you try to SSH into the machine and you don't check the fingerprint on the server, how do you know you're actually logging in without some man in the middle screwing you over? You literally need that. So that's where you're SSHing into something and it says, what's this key fingerprint? Is this valid? And you say yes without thinking, you're going to screw yourself. So don't do that. Always check the server fingerprint, the SSH key fingerprint, make sure they match, and then log in and accept it. Okay, that's my best practices advice to you. So let's go back real quick. We're almost done. I just want to make sure it actually completed. Create complete. That's good. We have what was it trying to do? Let's go template. Literally, this should match the exact file living in your GitHub. And let's see, the EC2 instances, we saw that they existed. So it actually did its job. And so that's basically how you deploy it from scratch. Now, as a final note here, if you want to make a change to this, like you don't like this tag being test1, you want to make it test 1A, all you do now is that you have GitHub controlling everything. You go to code, find your YAML file, you do an edit, find the offending tag, change it to like A, okay, and then when you do a commit directly to main branch, you say commit changes. That literally just kicks off the Rube Goldberg machine. GitHub Actions takes over. It pushes your change to CloudFormation, and CloudFormation does a stack update, literally to only change this one value from test1 to test1A. If I were to do this, you would actually see it work, and then you immediately go over to your EC2 instance, and you can see the tag is changed. You have any questions?
Do it.
You want to do it? I'll do it. I swear. Okay. Challenge accepted. Really easy. A. Commit. Then you want to see the status. You can see that it kicked off immediately. Here's your deploy. It's doing its magic. This is a live update. You don't need to refresh. We can go to CloudFormation, and we can go to the stacks, and we can refresh. Might take a second to wake up. You can also go to events.
Oh yeah, create in progress.
This reminds me of the Super
Oh.
Troopers GIF enhance. Enhance.
So now this was earlier, right? This is when it was created initially. So what we're doing is we're doing the equivalent of an update or a stack.
There it goes.
Oh, there it goes. Yeah. So update in progress. Update complete. EC2. The instance was called test1. Go to instances. Test1A.
Hey. Nice.
And if you can verify it by going into there and going to the tags, and you can see that it's test1A.
Perfect.
Does it
Great.
terminate your other instances, Warelock? Like
What's
if you
that?
spin up the other two instances, does it terminate your other ones?
I don't know what it did to change that tag. I think it would be the least intrusive action possible. So like it literally, the only change you're trying to do is update a tag. That doesn't require you stopping and starting any machine.
If you go through the documentation, for every change that's being made, it will actually let you know if it's actually if it's gonna do like a tear down or a soft update or things like that.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm like, okay, well, I don't like that anymore. I'm just gonna I need to put this back anyway, but let's just do that. And it's literally this simple. So now GitHub has made Amazon. It's I will not use curse words here, but you can insert your own. And actions.
It's BFF.
It's
Best friend
it's
forever.
best friend forever. But you can see it's pretty quick, right? I mean, and GitHub gives you like logs about this and tells you exactly. And if something goes wrong, it'll tell you right here too. So, okay, so that's it. Any questions? I know I went over a lot.
No, it was really helpful to see like the workflow process of it. I've heard of GitHub Actions. I've heard of kind of like the deployment method, but I haven't seen it kind of be configured live or just haven't spent the time to do it. So that was.
It's probably a lot easier if you don't have to do it with access keys and creating users and all kinds of weirdo shit. Just this stuff basically just like doing do it in with code commit, because that's literally just Git. It's a replacement for GitHub.com inside of AWS, and it's probably a lot easier than this. But then they probably nickel and dime. So it's like if you want one less thing to be nickel and dime to death, do it this way.
All right,
Sorry,
well,
Amazon.
Anybody else have any other questions for Warelock? Come
I just
on.
can't wait to get going on this. It's awesome.
Did I put? Okay, so you should have a link. Make sure. I think I gave you a link to this. This is like the little blog post. So in order to make this work, you're gonna have to have access to, create a free tier account in Amazon. You're gonna have to create a GitHub.com account, right? Here's code commit. This is just the documentation for code commit. Former2, the GitHub repo is posted in the chat. Just do a git clone of it, and it'll give you an index.html, which you can simply just open with your browser, and you don't need to go to former2.com. So that gives you this deal. What else? I don't know if I gave you. Did I give you this?
If you could just post it all in the meetup text channel.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Make it a little bit
Anyway,
easier.
so just for the video, these are all of the links. And this is a really good video. This guy talks about Former2. Yes. This guy talks about Former2. It's a good video walkthrough, and it's pretty short. It doesn't exactly cover what you want, but it's a good intro to like have somebody walk you through Former2. So there's that, and let's see if there's anything else. That is it.
Cool. Well, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Warelock, for doing that presentation. Definitely learned a lot. I appreciate you answering some of my dumb questions. I just wanted to kind of like add in some questions in case anybody had any questions for that.